Welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time you've really outdone yourself with the source material. Religion and philosophy. I mean, wow, this is heavy stuff.
It really is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a mountain of material. But, it's deceptively simple looking, this stack of readings. It's tempting to think, oh, religion, philosophy, two separate things, right? But the more we dig into this, the more I think we're going to find that they're really intertwined.
Oh, definitely. And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting, right? We get to untangle all these connections, these threads that run between these two, well, I guess, massive domains of human thought.
Absolutely, like a tapestry almost.
I like that. The tapestry with all these different colors and textures woven together.
Exactly. But before we get lost in all those intricate details, maybe we should start with the basics.
Yeah, good idea. Back to the 101. So, what are the fundamental, key differences between these two, religion and philosophy? Where do they even begin to diverge?
Well, I think a good place to start is with their approach to knowledge.
Okay, yeah. How do they each, I guess, go about figuring out what's what?
Right. So religion often relies on revelation, faith, accepting truths revealed through, sacred texts, divine experiences, things like that.
I see. So it's about trusting in a higher power or a sacred source of knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. You could think of it kind of like inheriting a family heirloom.
Oh, okay.
You cherish it, right? You
Yeah.
trust its value, even if you don't know every single detail of its history.
Okay, so where does philosophy fit into this heirloom analogy?
Well, philosophy is less about inheriting and more about appraising. It's examining those heirlooms with a critical eye, asking questions like, where did this come from? Is it authentic? What makes it valuable? It relies on things like reason and logic, evidence to try and understand the world.
So one's about trusting the source and the other is about verifying it. Sounds like there's some potential for conflict there.
Oh, absolutely. And their purposes often differ too. Religions often provide moral guidance, frameworks for how to behave, answers to those big existential questions we all have, like, why are we here?
Yeah. Trying to provide some comfort, some meaning when faced with all the uncertainty of life.
Exactly, a sense of direction, a path to follow. While philosophy, on the other hand, it thrives on questioning, challenging assumptions, exploring all sorts of different perspectives, sometimes even questioning those very paths laid out by religions.
So less about providing concrete answers and more about encouraging us to think critically.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you wonder, did all that questioning ever cause any friction? I mean, did philosophers ever get in trouble for pushing those boundaries?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. Especially back in the day when, well, religion held a lot more sway.
Oh, countless examples. Just think about, well, the early days of Christianity. You have figures like Augustine grappling with all these ideas from ancient Greek philosophers, trying to reconcile them with Christian theology. It wasn't always easy.
Well, there's been a lot of intellectual wrestling going on.
Oh, for sure. But that interaction, as sometimes contentious as it might have been, that's really where things get fascinating because it wasn't just a one-way street. You see, philosophical ideas often seeped into religious thought, shaping and reshaping beliefs over time.
So it's more like a dance then,
Mm.
like a back and forth.
Exactly. A complex, very dynamic dance where sometimes, yeah, they're stepping on each other's toes and sometimes they're moving in perfect harmony.
Gotcha. So can you give us an example of that, where those two, I guess, dance partners really came together?
One really fascinating example is the impact of Greek philosophy on early Christian ideas about the soul.
Okay, the soul. Now we're getting into some deep stuff.
Hmm?
So how did Greek thought influence Christian ideas about the soul?
Well, you see, early Christian thinkers were heavily influenced by Plato's ideas.
Oh
Plato.
yeah, of course.
His ideas about the soul being immortal, separate from the body. This concept wasn't explicitly present in early Jewish texts, but it became a real cornerstone of Christian belief, shaping their understanding of the afterlife, salvation, all of that.
So Greek philosophy essentially provided some of the building blocks for key Christian concepts.
You could say that, yeah. And, this kind of cross-pollination of ideas, it wasn't just limited to Christianity. Just think about Stoicism.
Stoicism. Okay. Remind me about Stoicism.
It's a school of philosophy emphasizing self-control and virtue. and its principles, they had a profound impact on early Christian ethics, shaping how they viewed morality, right action, all of that.
Interesting. It's like those philosophical ideas were just floating around out there, and different religious traditions were like picking them up and weaving them into their own. Well, you used the word tapestry before, right?
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, did those tapestries ever clash?
Yeah, I bet they did. And that's where we get into the heart of the tension between religion and philosophy.
Exactly. And that's something we'll definitely explore further in part two.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into those clashes, the tension, the times when religion and philosophy weren't exactly seeing eye to eye.
Exactly. And, remember how we were talking about philosophy's like tendency to just question
Like they
everything?
always got to be poking and prodding.
Well, that questioning, sometimes it led to some pretty direct confrontations, yeah, with religious dogma.
Oh, I bet. So what kind of things were they butting heads about? Give us an example.
Well, one classic battleground, I guess you could say, was the question of authority.
Ah, okay. Authority. So who's in charge here?
Right. Like religion often relies on, well, sacred texts, pronouncements from religious leaders, they're seen as the ultimate source of truth.
Right, right.
But philosophers, with their whole emphasis on reason and evidence, well, sometimes they challenge those sources.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of like those family heirlooms we were talking about earlier, right? Philosophy is that relative who's like, wait a minute, are we sure this is actually valuable? Let's take a closer look.
Exactly. And one of the most famous examples of this kind of clash is the case of Galileo.
Oh yeah, Galileo. That's a big one.
Right. He challenged the church's view of the universe. They believed that the earth was the center of everything.
Geocentric.
Yeah, exactly. Geocentric. But Galileo, he used his astronomical observations to argue for a heliocentric model.
So the sun's at the center.
Right. And let's just say that didn't go over very well.
Yeah, I can imagine. The church wasn't exactly thrilled to be told they had it wrong.
Not exactly. But
Hey.
Galileo basically said, hey, the evidence is right here.
He was like, sorry guys, but the data doesn't lie.
Right. And, that's just one example. There were, so many others. Another recurring battleground was this whole concept of free will versus divine will.
Well, that's a good one. I mean, that's something people still debate today.
Oh, for sure. It's a real philosophical head scratcher. I mean, if God is all knowing, all powerful, do we really have free choice? Or is everything predetermined?
Right, like are we writing our own story or are we just, I don't know, actors in a play that's already been written?
Exactly. And then you have some philosophers who, well, they went even further. They questioned, I don't know, like the very foundation of religious belief itself.
Okay, now we're talking. So who are some of these more radical thinkers?
Well, Nietzsche, for example, he was very critical of what he saw as the stifling effects of traditional religion. He thought it kind of held people back from really thinking for themselves, from being creative.
So he was like, wake up, people. Stop letting dogma dictate your lives.
Pretty much. But, even with all these clashes, all this tension, there were also these, I guess you could call them attempts to bridge the gap, to find some kind of common ground.
Really? So it wasn't always just fighting?
No, not always. There were always these attempts to find a way for these two, I don't know, seemingly opposing forces to coexist, or even to complement each other.
Okay, so who are some of these peacemakers, the ones who tried to bring harmony to the philosophical and religious battlefield?
Well, one of the biggest names is Thomas Aquinas.
Aquinas, yeah, I've heard of
He
him.
was a Christian theologian, and he argued that faith and reason, they weren't enemies. He saw them as two paths leading to the same ultimate truth.
So he wasn't saying you had to choose one or the other.
No. He thought they could work together. In fact, he even used, Aristotelian logic to try to prove the existence of God.
Whoa. So he was like, look, I can use your tools, reason, and logic to support my faith.
Exactly. He was a real synthesizer, trying to bring together these two powerful forces. And, this desire to bridge the gap, it wasn't limited to Christian thinkers either.
Oh, really? Tell me about some others.
Well, in Islamic philosophy, you have figures like Mullah Sadra, and he really brilliantly wove together mystical insights, rational thought, traditional Islamic theology, all of it.
So Aquinas was building bridges in the Christian world, and Mullah Sadra was doing the same in the Islamic world. That's really interesting.
Right, and it's not just, Western traditions either. In in Hindu thought, you have Adi Shankaracharya, and he argued that scripture and reason were both essential for understanding, for understanding ultimate reality.
So it's this common thread across all these different traditions, this desire to find a way to reconcile faith and reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Like deep down, we all want to make sense of the world to find meaning. And sometimes that search leads to some pretty radical ideas.
Radical ideas, huh? Like what?
Well, let me tell you about Baruch Spinoza.
Okay, Spinoza, lay it on me.
So Spinoza, he was this 17th century philosopher, and he kind of turned the traditional concept of God on its head.
Okay, how so?
Well, he came up with this idea called pantheism, and he basically argued that God wasn't this separate being who created the universe. He said that God was the universe, like everything, everywhere, all at once.
Whoa, that's a lot to take in. So instead of God being like out there
Yeah.
somewhere, he's saying God is like in here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like God is all around us, part of everything we experience.
Wow. I bet that didn't make him very popular with the religious authorities.
He was definitely controversial, but his ideas, they really sparked some of the most interesting philosophical and theological debates. I mean, people are still talking about him today.
And that's what's so amazing about all of this, right? This whole dance between religion and philosophy, it's still going on. It's still shaping how we understand ourselves, the universe, everything.
And it's not just happening on this grand scale. It's also happening on a personal level. Like, how do you, the listener, how do you navigate these two worlds?
That's a great question, and that's something we're going to explore in our final part. And we're back. It's the final part of our deep dive into religion and philosophy. Boy, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? I mean, we've covered so much ground.
We have, from those basic differences to the clashes to, the surprising moments of harmony.
Yeah, but now I think it's time to turn the spotlight on the listener.
Yeah.
Because as fascinating as all these historical figures and debates are, I think they really all point back to a question that each of us has to grapple with personally.
Exactly. I mean, it's all very interesting, all this history and these big ideas, but ultimately it comes down to, well, how do we navigate this relationship?
Yeah, you really left us hanging last time. How do we, as individuals, figure out this whole religion and philosophy thing?
It's a tough question. I mean, there's no one right answer, right? For some people, it's very clear cut. They find comfort and guidance in a specific religious tradition, and that's all they need.
Right. And then there are others who are more, more drawn to a purely rational, evidence-based way of looking at the world. They find meaning and purpose outside of any kind of religious framework.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have people who are, well, they're kind of in between. They might embrace the teachings of a particular religion, but they still want to ask those tough questions to challenge assumptions, like some of the thinkers we've been talking about.
Oh, they're holding on to both of those maps we talked about, the one they inherited through tradition and the one they've carefully charted out using their own reason and experience.
Exactly. And, sometimes those maps, they line up perfectly. And sometimes they lead to very different places.
It's that tension, I think, that makes it so fascinating, so human.
It really is.
Because at the end of the day, aren't we all just searching for something to believe in, something that gives us a sense of purpose, of meaning?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we're all trying to make sense of this crazy, vast universe we live in.
Right, and whether we find that sense of meaning in a religious faith, a philosophical framework, a scientific worldview, or some combination of all of those, the fact that we're even searching, I think that it says a lot about who we are.
Yeah. It speaks to this deep human need to understand ourselves and the world around us.
And I think what's really cool is that this whole conversation, it's not just happening in dusty old books or academic debates. It's happening within each of us.
Yeah.
All the time.
Right. And the beautiful thing is there's no right or wrong answer. I think what really matters is that we keep engaging in the conversation, that we stay curious, that we keep asking those questions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe that's our takeaway for the listener. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep searching. And who knows? You might just stumble upon some pretty amazing truths along the way.
Absolutely. Happy diving, everyone.